to be honest, some of my grades definitely plummeted because I was so busy focused on running, and that took up all the mental space in my head. And realizing that you have to jig and change your whole entire life plan was one of the hardest experiences I've ever had. And no one really talks about that. There is some talk about the grief after the D1 experience, but I didn't even get to have the D1 experience, which hurt a lot for me because I'd grown up watching Caitlin Toohey, I'd grown up running the cross countries, I'd grown up with this massive community through sport and this competitiveness and this competitive spirit that just went. I mean, I lost all routine and my grades started going down even more. I managed to pull them back up because I knew that I had to get really solid grades to get into a good uni, and I ended up going to university in England with a year abroad in the US. So I still got to experience the US experience, and I actually realised that, I mean, I got to go and see how challenging the D1 life is as a kind of walk-on. And walk-ons are essentially someone who didn't make the team, didn't have a scholarship, but are trying to get onto the track team to be able to either get a scholarship or simply just run for the school. Life as a walk-on is so challenging and no one talks about that at all. I mean, the culture in the US is absolutely constant with sport. And you definitely get treated differently if you are an athlete or not. I went to a D1 school and all the athletes are treated very, very, very differently, and you're treated with almost more respect. There's something called NARCs, which are non-athletic regular people, which is the first I'd ever heard of it. So there is quite a disconnect between the athlete D1 person and the non-athlete in the US college system. And that was really hard for me to navigate. And I found that really difficult because I think it's so important to have friends who aren't in the sports space, because they really bring that clarity and that element that sport isn't your entire life, and it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't need to be, because when something happens where your identity gets massively shifted and you can't do that sport anymore, you have to realize the amazing other things that you have in your life, or the kind of skills and qualities that you can hone and take from your sporting life into kind of reality. So I went to America for that 1 year, got to experience the culture, came back, and I found it really hard settling back into university life again. I'd had kind of like a year at uni, a year in America, a year at uni, and I came back and I got quite obsessed with sport again. I got obsessed with road cycling because it was a way that I felt the calmest. I could go out, and for the first time I wouldn't have all those thoughts and feelings. And to be honest, I hadn't dealt with the mental impact of what had happened the 3 years prior with my Achilles, and it came back to kind of overwhelm me when I came back from America, because I'd seen the culture of what I could have had, and that was really difficult to kind of reason with, that I was never going to get that experience for myself, as selfish as that sounds. And I think I saw the community that people had got from having that team sport and that team spirit, and it really pained me. So I came back and I kind of went back into overtraining, and as if I were an athlete competing, and I never stopped. And in the November of 2024, I re-tore the same Achilles. I was doing 300-kilometer cycling weeks. I was training with only boys groups, because in my head, training with the boys meant that I was training at the highest possible standard that I could. It meant that I was never chasing the standard of my own gender. I was always chasing more and more and more and more. And I think it's growing up always having trained with boys and maybe having been compared a lot to, you need to be like this girl and you need to run this girl's times or you won't be accepted into the group. So I kind of found some kind of comfort and community in training with boys and men. And when I tore my Achilles, it was as bad as the first time, but it was the fact that I couldn't live without the overtraining, and it had bled into every aspect of my life.